In the United States, there was no significant use of marijuana as an intoxicant until the early 1900s. So, what substances were Americans using to get high at the dawn of the 20th century? Alcohol, tobacco, opium, morphine, and cocaine. During this time, marijuana use was known among people from Mexico and the Caribbean. For example, marijuana use was common along the Rio Grande River, and Caribbean merchants and sailors brought marijuana into cities along the Gulf of Mexico, like New Orleans, Houston, and Galveston. In 1906, the U.S. Congress passed the Pure Food and Drug Act. This was the first major federal drug legislation to require labeling of all preparations containing more than prescribed amounts of opiates. In 1914, the city of El Paso, Texas, passed an ordinance which banned the sale and possession of marijuana. The rationale for this law was the belief that marijuana caused violent behavior among, quote, Mexicans, Negroes, prostitutes, pimps, and a criminal class of whites, close quote. This rationale is representative of the prevailing views of that time. This law was also one of the earliest laws to specifically criminalize marijuana. In that same year, Congress passed the Narcotics Tax Act, also known as the Harrison Act. This law required registration and payment of an occupational tax by all persons who imported, produced, dealt in, sold, or gave away opium and coca leaves and their derivatives. As American government was understood in 1914, only the states could regulate the practice of medicine, and the federal government could not do so unless the activity involved interstate commerce. But the federal government expressly has the power to tax. So the courts upheld the Harrison Act on revenue-raising grounds. Eventually, the Harrison Act became a de facto prohibition law. Between 1914 and 1931, the individual states responded to the Harrison Act by passing their own laws criminalizing cocaine and opiate possession. These were known as Little Harrison Acts. In 1915, the U.S. Treasury Department issued an administrative decision prohibiting the importation of cannabis for non-medical purposes. In 1922, Congress passed the Narcotic Drug Import and Export Act. This act established the Federal Narcotics Control Board and made drug possession a federal crime. As one historian has put it, quote, the most important feature of this initial prohibitory phase is that marijuana was inevitably viewed as a narcotic drug, thereby invoking the broad consensus underlying the nation's recently enunciated anti-narcotics policy. This classification emerged primarily from the drug's alien character. Although the use of some drugs, alcohol and tobacco, was indigenous to American life, the use of narcotics for pleasure was not. Evidently, drugs associated with ethnic minorities and with otherwise immoral populations were automatically viewed as narcotics.